let's get started. I'm going to introduce, well, he'll introduce himself again, the very famous Dr. Gonzalo Camarillo, and he will then lead this panel. Mr. Camarillo, can you please come up? Dr. Camarillo. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Yes. So I'm going to please ask the speakers, the panelists, to come here. They are finishing changing the batteries, so just please take a chair and...
Hi, Eric.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we're going to run the second channel, the second panel, the third segment of this session. And actually, the end of the previous panel was an excellent segue into what we're going to discuss now, which was the techno-economic analysis, how to monetize the IOWN Global Forum technologies and infrastructures, and cost versus opportunity. So we're going to be looking into all that here. So I think it was great the way the previous panel ended, actually. The main theme of the panel, you can see there, so increasing the ROI for 5G and beyond. 5G and beyond meaning after 5G will come 6G or whatever comes next. And that's important, so we will be taking both the short term, the medium term, and the long term. So as in the previous panel, and as I said before, we are trying new things when we have this type of event. Last time we had a panel that was more scripted, and we had presentations with slides. This time we are trying to put together a different panel, so it's going to be more informal, more as a conversation. So, panelists are free to, request the floor, speak, so I don't need to, basically ask each of you explicitly. And in addition to that, another feedback we got last time, 1 year ago, is that part of the public, they were really willing to ask questions. So this time, as we did with the previous panel again, we will be opening the floor to basically the public. So, we will have a Q&A session. So you can start thinking of your questions, and then we will have some, hand mics on the aisles. Having said that, please, we can start by, each of the panelists to introduce yourself. So, Eric, please.
Thank you, and good evening. So my name is Eric Ardouin. I'm with Orange. So Orange is a telecom operator and service provider operating in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And in Orange, I'm leading the research on future networks design. So that includes fixed networks, mobile networks, and homelands. Thank you.
Thank you. Cayetano.
Good afternoon. I'm Cayetano Carbajo. I'm working in Telefónica, 30 years already in Telefónica. I'm leading core transport and ecosystem in the technical corporate unit of Telefónica, what we call Global CTIO.
Thank you. Nakamura-san.
Yep. Nice to meet you, and thank you very much for inviting me to this great session. I'm Takehiro Nakamura from NTT.com. I'm a Chief Standardization Officer and also a corporate evangelist. My main role is already for the 6G, promotion of the 6G and the standardization. But before going to the 6G, of course, we need to promote 5G more in terms of especially on the monetization. So I'm working for both 5G and 6G now.
Thank you, Nakamura-san. Udayan.
Good afternoon. My name is Udayan. I drive all the product architecture for 5G network as well as the beyond, including standards. So in that, we develop silicon and systems for virtual RAN, custom RAN, as well as packet core, and the edge AI and telco AI. And I also own the worldwide team for NextG and 6G standards.
Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Jong Yun Shin. I'm working for SK Telecom. Usually, I focus on the transport technology development, and which is in mobile network or data center or like that. Yeah, that's this.
Thank you. As you saw before, we were talking about the diversity of memberships. Here, obviously, we have 4 network operators because the topic is actually very much related, but also a technology provider like Intel, one of the founding members of IOWN Global Forum. So I think we have, we will have different perspectives to tackle this. So first of all, maybe we can go around just starting on the shorter term, like 5G, and starting also with APN, the all-photonic network, because we will be talking about other technologies later, but I think the IOWN Global Forum is best known for the APN. So how do you think we could basically introduce APN into 5G, and what would be the benefits? Maybe you can start, Eric.
Sure. So for us, I have to say that APN is probably the main reason why we are a member of the IOWN Global Forum. And the good thing with APN is that, of course, it has all the benefits that were presented earlier this afternoon. So higher capacity, lower energy consumption, and also a lot more flexibility. I mean, latency for us, I would say, especially with 5G, is not the main reason. I think that we have the latency we need at the moment, and we have the 5G technology for the latency needs that we have. Of course, there is AI, which is on the horizon, which is a big question mark for us in terms of what it will need exactly from the network. But coming back from the essential characteristics of the APN, APN for us will be really important in order to meet our carbon emissions trajectory. As you know, Orange, but many other operators have taken strong commitments in being net zero at a certain point in time. It's 2040 for Orange. That means that any future technologies needs to help us to meet those objectives. And going to all photonics networks removes the electric to optic conversions. It allows us to save a lot of energy. And just for that, it's extremely important for us. I could continue for a long time, but maybe I will leave my colleagues.
Yeah, we have time, but thanks for the introduction, because that's really good. Maybe we can go with Cayetano as well.
I agree with Eric that I think sustainability and energy consumption is one of the key factors. But there are some others that are relevant. You mentioned a couple of them. For instance, flexibility. I think APN will provide mobile network front-hauling, back-hauling flexibility, and I think this is clearly a benefit for our mobile network, but also the capability of integrating and simplifying even the footprint of our cell site. This is as well relevant, and with APN we could do that. But certainly energy consumption is a key factor for mobile network. Capacity, and I think it is not as relevant. I think for sure wireline capacity is much higher than mobile network, so this is not a key requirement or a specific requirement. We will take advantage of it for sure, but it's not a key requirement. And latency, we have latency issues in other part. I mean, radio latency is now our weaker point. But agree, sustainability plus flexibility and capability of integration from my point of view.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, thank you. Nakamura-san.
Yeah, okay. Of course, our current 5G network currently they're providing the very high performance, but continuously we need to evolve our network. Even before the 6G introduction, we need to evolve the current 5G systems to meet the variety of the requirement from the market. And of course, yes, as two guys mentioned, that of course sustainability and power efficiency, that is very important even for now, and that need to be improved more and more. And also, in order to develop the new use cases and the new source of the revenues, of course, we should create the new services based on the high performance in terms of the high data rate capacity and also low latency. So in that sense, not only the wireless technology improvement, the wireline technologies, including the optical technologies, that will be very essential. And in the end, we need to provide excellent services end-to-end manner. So both wireless, wired, both technologies need to be evolved so that we can provide very excellent services even in the 5G era. Yeah.
Thank you, Nakamura-san. Diane.
Yeah, a couple of points. You know, not only in 5G, but as we go along deploying, utilization of the spectrum is very important. Spectrum is so valuable. And then you see more and more massive MIMO and higher number of MIMOs are actually getting implemented. So throughput, and we call it XHAul, so there is a front haul or back haul is expanding. So I see APN, Open APN, is a key technology to actually help us, especially in this front haul, as we explore in the data throughput. The other thing is that, we talk about ROI. I mean, I've been working with both the key, all the operators, including we have deployed massive memories of public knowledge in Verizons of the world in the United States. Everybody is looking for monetization beyond that $50 that they get from you and me, per month. And so one of the things that APN fundamentally can provide is this distributed computing platform. So we talked about this in our IOWN group and others like RDMA over APN. So you can have low latency compute spread around. So imagine that in the far edge, if you need certain amount of compute, tomorrow's AI elements of distributed training and others, you can actually spread it around. So this is becoming very key to get the monetization going as well.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. John.
Okay. Yes, I agree with APNs can maximize the data's capacity of transmission and lower the latency through the innovative optical technology. Yeah. But I want to share the experience about the openness of APN in 5G. Actually, SK Telecom has adopted 4G. It's already centralized RAN. But the main difference between the 4G and 5G, we focus on the openness. For example, in the LTE era, we purchased optical module from the base station vendor together. But now the 5G, we are sourcing the WDM optical module, and then we integrated the optical module into base station's system, like that. And this approach is along with IP over WDM, can reduce the power consumptions by 40%, and even though lower the cost. So I think it's what I want to share this my own experience.
Yeah. Interesting, thank you. I mean, it's interesting to see that this is not all about latency and capacity, but most important, flexibility and basically power consumption and the sustainability aspect that we are taking. Both Cayetano and Diane, you guys mentioned backhaul. The IOWN Global Forum has been talking a lot about front haul. You see the APN also playing a role there?
I think front haul will be easier with evolution of technology, exactly. And APN will help us on that for sure. We are not using that much front haul today or front hauling today, but with evolution, not only 5G but beyond, the usage of front hauling will be more and more justified. So it is not something that is we see as a key requirement today, but with the evolution of the technology, we will have it. And APN will help us in achieving this in a easier and a cheaper way.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Both the front haul, I'll give you some use case for backhaul as well. But front haul will be much easier because the throughput with massive memos are exploding. But we are also having some implementations where you have user plane of RAN and user plane of packet code are also getting together in some of the enterprise network and others. In that case, you have mobile edge compute after the packet code. You can use this now to actually do low latency, compute, distributed compute quite a bit. So this opens up beyond, just frontal. And just think of new applications like XR, VR, and all of those things. I mean, we always talk about remotely looking into some, music program. I mean, you got to have that experience. I mean, what better than a low latency transport that APN comes up with? It's great.
Yeah. Just one comment on it. I personally see difficult to have data plane, UPF together with base station. I think capillarity will be too high for that. Maybe in some exceptional cases, but this will not be the normal thing, in my opinion. And also, the need of backhaul after this UPF will be much lower capacity that maybe APN is not that much justified. I think front hauling will have key requirement of capacity. Backhauling, even if you have packet core capabilities in the base station, will be less relevant, in my opinion.
Relatively, but there are use cases happening today where you have a lot of user plane and control plane in the cloud, happening today.
Yeah. Eric wanted the floor.
Yeah, I mean, we see APN as a technology that is applicable to any kind of optical networks.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, even in the future, I mean, after 2030, we are seriously considering to have it in the access. And that, from that perspective also, APN would allow us to have a kind of convergence of the various optical networks. And we could reuse the same infrastructure for access to our customers' premises and also to connect the antennas of the mobile network.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So before going more into the features and 6G, how do you see like the deployment of an APN, for example, for a 5G network? Do you think you need to standardize something? You can just deploy it? What's your take on that? In practical terms, how do you deploy an APN in a 5G network?
At the moment, we don't see APN usable in the short term for us. We see rather it for the 6G era.
Okay.
At least for the mobile network. For the transport network, probably we can do things already to connect data centers, for instance. And that, I think NTT has commercialized an offer.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's doable today, but it's still for limited use cases.
Yes. And that was commented in the previous panel, and thanks for bringing it up, yeah, that NTT is basically providing already a commercial service now with an APN, and I think that's extremely exciting. We had promised last year that we would have early commercial deployments this year, so, you know, that basically we are, you know, walking the talk.
To comment on myself, we expect that it will not happen, you know, as everything at some point, it will happen progressively. That means that progressively we will have the optical network equipment that will incorporate some features of APN. And some of them will be available much likely before 2030.
Yeah. Is your view also, it's more for the longer term than the shorter term?
Yeah, things are happening. I mean, we, like, for example, from chipset point of view, like I'll give an example of my own company. Like we have foundation NIC as well as the smart NIC elements. We are already closely working with partners in IOWN Group to make sure that, you know, we support, you know, this. But again, the standard implementation and other, it will take time, but taking the steps.
Okay, yeah. Cayetano wanted to...
Yeah, I see this more in the medium term, and I agree with Eric that this will be something progressive. This will not be a big bang, that all the functionality will be available, but this will be progressive, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not talking about a flag day when we go APN,
No,
suddenly.
usually things doesn't happen that way.
Exactly. Nakamura-san, something to add?
Yeah, of course, the APN has an excellent capability and performance. But that, it is important to consider how to introduce the APN technology into the current 5G network. Of course, the mobile operator cannot replace our network suddenly. So maybe we need to consider the ROI to introduce the API. And maybe possibly gradually we will introduce the APN into our network for the necessary portion, necessary place, so that gradually we can improve our network overall performance. On the other hand, now private 5G, private network is a very, very interesting topic, and many vertical players has a strong interest in the private network, private 5G. Private 5G case, maybe it is easier to introduce the APN technology from the beginning, yes. In case that there is no legacy systems. So in that case, private 5G can use the APN technologies with, and also together with the excellent mobile communication technologies together, and then we can provide an excellent end-to-end performance for the private 5G case. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, actually, we already deployed the 5G base stations already done now, so nationwide. So it is difficult to changing any site or any technology is now currently, but we are still in the LTE service in now, and then someday, a few years after, there also will be replacement for even though LTE case. So in the cases we are changing the site, chance to that. So And that actually, by IOWN technology, we anticipate extending fronthaul distance from the currently 30 kilometer to 50 kilometer, and even though up to 200 kilometers, like that. Because we want to decrease the number of the DU hotels. So now the chance to LTE modernization what were next level. Yes, we want to, that is a hurdle, is limitation, is distance. So now we are some focus on that IOWN technology, even though, yeah, we make it more, the innovative, some result in that.
Yeah, this is actually a great segue to the next question I had in mind, but it's also a very nice bridge to the previous panel when we were talking about, and in particular when Kawashima-san was explaining. So we have, as you know, several use cases. One of is connecting financial institutions. We went to London to basically make sure that our requirements were realistic by talking to several financial service institutions. And the point was exactly the same. The point was not capacity or delay per se, it was the distance between data centers that they could support. So that's very much in line. Saying that, we've been talking at, having basically, front haul, probably not in the short term, but a bit in the longer term. What are the use cases that you can see that, they could benefit from that? I mean, you started by saying basically you could have, more separation. Any other basically aspects where you see that would be beneficial that, we can start with Eric, yeah.
Yeah, we mentioned that flexibility is one of the great features of APN. If you have more flexibility, then you need less over-provisioning of your network, and that translates into cost efficiency. So it allows you to invest less for the same benefit.
Okay. Now, that's a really good point. Yeah. Well, we can go in order. Cayetano.
I think flexibility is a key benefit. I think extending distances, in the case of the front haul, that is your question specifically, as well. I think if we can have centralization of baseband in a longer distance, depending on the availability of the fiber and the consumption of fiber, but this could be a relevant advantage for sure.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's interesting that you both are talking about centralization because we have, several use cases in IOWN, in particular the early adopters use cases, and it's funny because some of them are about centralization, the other is basically about like having, we were talking before, avoiding, big data centers, distributing infrastructure. So we see both aspects, and here is a bit more about centralization. Yeah, Nakamura-san.
Yeah, in principle, in terms of the use cases, even in the 5G from the beginning, the characteristics of the 5G, the higher data rate, higher capacity, lower latency, blah, blah, blah. It's totally the same as the IOWN concept.
Yes.
So in that sense, the IOWN and APN has an excellent affinity with the 5G and also even for the future 6G. And I also want to say that currently 5G, the spectrum, major spectrum is a sub-6, yes. And the millimeter wave is not so used. Actually, I'm a fan of millimeter wave. I'm shouting millimeter wave all over the world. But actually, millimeter wave has a good affinity with APN. Millimeter wave can provide very high data rate, capacity, and also latency. That's the APN. So if you can consider the end-to-end service provision, of course, we need to provide the last 1 mile access, especially radio. If so, APN network should connect to the millimeter wave network so that we can provide end-to-end high performance in terms of the higher data rate and capacity. So it is good time to push the millimeter wave together with APN, yes, so that everybody happy.
Excellent.
I agree. I think APN and millimeter wave would be a good combination. There's another point, apart from what Nakamura-san mentioned, that is millimeter wave will be deployed in a small cell scenario, centralization of baseband, and that scenario, it is even more relevant. So yes, I agree that it is matching perfectly.
Yeah. It's interesting, following on what you three said, and in particular, Eric said, you don't have to over-provision. In conversations, I heard also the opposite, right? Like they could basically still over-provision and then have a network basically shared by several operators, which would be basically, another scenario. You think that's also a potential scenario going down the road?
It's always possible, yes. When you have a lot of capacity, you can sell part of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's a different than business model.
Yeah,
Type
it's
of
very different.
activity. We are doing both, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, we are also a wholesale provider.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
One thing for sure, just on that millimeter wave, I share that love as well. And if Nakamura-san remember, even before we started 5G NR, there was some standardization activity we did that Verizon brought a lot of people together. That was purely on fixed wireless access and 28 gigahertz and 39 gigahertz in US, which is basically millimeter wave, but didn't, at this point. Now, one of the biggest challenges that you have, if you look into when we started Open RAN, or virtual RAN, or we call it opening up this, and there was a seminal paper, and I'm dating myself, 2011 or 12, something in that China Mobile published on Cloud RAN. Is all about centralization, how that improves a lot of pooling, virtual pooling, increase utilization, getting a page out of the word Google and other cloud industry. But if you look into what has happened in 5G, in Open RAN, vRAN, or custom RAN, this is all actually becoming truly a distributed RAN, means these are all implemented at the far edge. These are not really centralized anything. This is traditionally, if you look into what Verizon did, they you had the custom RAN there in the same cabinet, same far edge, replacing that. They are getting a lot of benefit. But this true pooling with multiple spectra, multiple band, multiple elements of it, is the centralization of it never happened yet. There are certain cases. Rakuten initially did some work in Japan. I think this Open APN can unleash that. And then what you talked about, that you can create a lightweight radios and then bring this thing truly in a centralized fashion. So I'm hoping that the centralized RAN will finally happen.
Finally, yeah, it's a reality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, the rethinking is also thinking about in 5G and 6G. There is some kind of the transforming in the AI era. So now everyone say the AI, and we also thinking of our DU hotel to be transformed into it's like a telco AGI infra. So we're thinking, is there a chance to 5G, even though 5G we have some area we put into the GPU or something like that. And there's between important thing is telco AGI networking. So networking is more cost effective and efficiently. So something like a previous session saying there's a connection in the same our mission in the inside the mobile network side. So now that is also use case for IOWN. So we're making some build or telco HA infra, and then even there is some chance to make some business model, even though HCI side, and even though that we have some additional national opportunity across the various industry. So that is various industry is IOWN said with lots of use cases nowadays, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think now people get a pretty good idea of how we could basically, how IOWN Global Forum technologies relate to 5G and 6G, because that may not have been clear for everyone. Having said that, we also talk about the flexibility, the sustainability aspect. Let's go into the main theme of the panel, which is there's been complaints that 5G is not being kind of monetized as was expected by operators, and that's why the panel is about how to increase return on investment. I would like to also approach it like following the conversation in the previous panel, which was opportunity cost. So what is the cost of not doing something? Use cases where basically we could benefit from that. And we could monetize them. So who wants to start?
The question is about use cases to monetize in general.
It's about how what we have discussed, like how integrating APN in a mobile network, whether it's 5G or 5G Advanced or 6G, could basically help with the monetization problem that we've been discussing?
I have no so clear answer. I mean, when I think in monetization capabilities or how to monetize network assets, I try to think in functionality that are adding additional services. We are thinking about slicing, for instance, or we are thinking about edge computing, or we are thinking about exposing APIs. And these capabilities, although they need, for sure, transport and optical connectivity, are far away in the network from basic transport capability. So, for sure, we'll have more flexibility. For sure, we'll have more capability, more capacity. But I don't see level of monetization itself. I perceive APM more from point of view of flexibility and cost avoidance rather than building monetization capabilities. If I may name monetization capabilities, I think these three that I mentioned, I mean, APIs, slicing, and edge, plus use cases that are possible with 5G and 5G SA that were not possible before. For instance, communication and XR capability could be something. And for sure, we have AI. We have to build a network for AI. And the latency requirement that we will have with inferencing AI may trigger some monetization capabilities. The key thing, in my opinion, for operator is not to make investment before this monetization capability are clear, like we did with 5G SA, that we implement the network and then look for monetization that didn't happen, at least yet.
Yeah. Okay. So you see it more as basically reducing the total cost of ownership, yeah, as opposed to building new monetization capabilities. Okay. I think Eric wanted.
Yeah, fully aligned with Cayetano here. One thing about AI, as I said earlier, for us it's a big question mark in terms of the requirements it will put on the network. I'm not talking about the use cases of AI of now, but the ones in maybe even in 1 year. It moves so fast, we don't know. And for sure, having the capability to have low latency on the optical domain, having high capacity, and having also the capacity, as it was mentioned in the earlier panel, the possibility to relax the requirements on where you put your edge in order to enable a certain latency or even to increase the capability of computing. These are clear kind of insurance for future investment efficiency. So in that sense, I agree with Cayetano. It's not about new monetization capability, but rather cost-efficient ways of responding to future needs.
Yeah, yeah. And avoiding the opportunity cost that, yeah, you would incur.
The ROI for 5G, if you ask a set of people here that was 5G considered success, I say yes, but there is mixed feedback you will get. One of the biggest reason is that when we started 5G, we talked about a couple of dimensions. EMBB, mobile broadband one, but mission critical IoT and massive IoT. Mission critical IoT, massive IoT is not really as taken off. Most of this deployment is still mobile broadband. Perhaps with IOWN Global Forum and APA, Open APN, I mean, this mission critical IoT use cases can actually thrive. For example, I think in initial days when we worked in IOWN, I mean, we talked about some use cases. I remember cyber physical, assimilations like VR and mixed elements of it, AI-based elements. So a lot of those use cases may get now, slicing and all of this are all there, but hardly being used at this point. But we should be able to, low latency transport, whether it's front haul, back haul, in mid haul, can always open up a lot more work. And I talked about distributed computing. So that becomes, whether you want to run some services there, So I think it opens up, this technology opens up a lot more avenues. And some of the use cases actually, to fair, IOWN Global Forum did talk about initial days, So I think we're looking forward to this.
Yeah, thank you. I think Nakamura-san wanted to.
Yeah, actually, I'm working for the 5G promotion still to monetize. The difficulty is yeah, normally our industries explain to our customer that yeah, 5G is a so excellent performance, higher data rate and a lower latency, blah, 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 blah. But they don't care. Yes, they cannot understand what the benefit for them. So we need to explain we need to explain using their terminology, of course, and we need to clearly explain what the benefit for each customers in terms of their use cases, their own use cases, what the gain and what the benefit in terms of the use cases, not the data rate, latency. Yeah. So still, most of the case, the users like manufacturing industry or factory and the healthcare industry, not so many people require the high data rate capacity, honestly. Yeah. The coverage or flexible use cases, not the wired line, the wireless communication is very useful for them. So, but if we provide wireless communication technologies for their use cases, not only the 4G or 5G, but the Wi-Fi is okay. Maybe case by case, we should provide appropriate services. And then, if they start using the wireless technologies, maybe they can understand, oh, wireless can be used for like this or like that, and also we can propose additionally, if we enhance the network facilities, including the computing facilities, your use cases can be improved like this. Such kind of the explanation will be needed. Maybe we don't need to explain the millimeter wave or APN for them. They don't care. But we can implement those kind of new technologies without any explanation of the millimeter wave or APN. But in the end, the benefit for their use cases can be improved using this kind of technology. Maybe that should be a nice scenario to introduce our new technologies, including APN, and then maybe we can monetize more.
Yeah.
That is current thinking.
Absolutely. No, I mean, translating benefits at the network level or transport level to something meaningful to a customer is something that is a challenge. And as I said, the IOWN Global Forum, we've been engaging a lot in defining use cases and talking to the stakeholders, because it's actually, sometimes it happens, we go to a stakeholder, and again, to put the example, we were in London lately talking to banks and financial institutions. Some of our assumptions were confirmed, some of them, we were told, well, this is not such a challenge, or this is less important. So I fully agree. I mean, this translation is extremely important.
But I think this is one of the challenges we have. I fully agree with Nakamura-san that we have to show what are the services that you can provide, what are the use cases you can provide. But the challenge is there are not so many new services that you can provide with 5G SA that you cannot provide with 5G NSA, for instance.
No.
We are starting to use slicing. We are already monetizing that, but it's tiny. I mean, we are starting. Ultra low latency is tiny. So these kind of things are starting to happen, and we have still not been able to implement so many new use cases. I think technology is there, but we have to awake the market demand for this kind of use cases that are making use of capabilities of the network that you have available in 5G SA and not in any other technology.
Yeah, I've heard this comment very often when saying that, in 4G you could basically do video streaming. With that in HSDPA it was so it was a clear driver for adoption. And in 5G, I agree. I mean, if we could have such a killer service, that would be extremely useful.
I think we are starting, but there's a way to go yet.
Baby steps.
and the reasons also for that is that all those new 5G capabilities, they are brought by 5G SA, which we are just starting to deploy now, 5 years after the initial or at least advertised 5G rollouts.
Yeah.
So we are actually at the beginning of the real 5G story.
Exactly. That's a good point.
Yeah, the same. We are, as I told you, we Edge AI infras can provide some GPU service for customers, like something like that. And then our problem is that usually our use case is enterprise solution. So we wanted the B2C some business model one, but it is some limitations like that. But so we call the AI CCTV or remotely controlled site, construction site, something like a use case, is still B2B business thing. So, but we are making our infra, so some days we are GPU as a service to customer, something like that. Is B2C also, even though we can do. So like in IOWN said, there is a remote GPU service for use case. I think it is something kind of the real early adoption use case in our infra, I think.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. So at this point, I think we can talk about other technologies and other things, but I would like to, give a chance to people to ask questions again, because I think that was kind of some part of the feedback we got last year, and in the first panel worked okay because people had very interesting questions. There's some hand mics there. If someone has a question, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll continue. Yes, I knew you were not going to disappoint us.
Thank you very much for the enlightening comment, and I agree with all of you that it's difficult, honestly, to be able to change the infrastructure in 5G just for the heck of having APN unless you have a real use case. I think that you will go to 6G, the core network, the access network will evolve, and then it will be backward compatible with 5G wherever you have 5G to look at the ROI. Anyway, my question was, do you see APN replacing fiber to the home? APN replacing fixed wireless access? Because fixed wireless access is probably one of the key use cases for EMBB that operators can monetize. Do you see that to be replaced by fiber to the home but have APN? Is that an opportunity?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So what do you think? From a consumer point of view, do you think it will be able to deploy fiber to home because APN is coming?
I don't see that. I think the main obstacle for having home pass is the cost of deploying the fiber and connecting the fiber to the home. Okay, technology in case of APN in the long future will provide more performance, and maybe the cost of technology will be lower, but the vast majority of the cost is the fiber deployment. So we are using fixed wireless in those locations that we cannot reach with the fiber. If you reach with the fiber, likely you will have already FTTH and not fixed wireless. So I don't see that APN will be a driver for changing from fixed wireless to FTTH, honestly.
Yeah, I agree on that one. Because it has to be cost competitive. I mean, in the United States, T-Mobile and Verizon provides fixed wireless access to home internet for $50 again. I mean, getting the fiber to the home and the last mile is always the digging. I know Google tried it in Oregon and a couple of other areas, but they also withdrew. So it's become a very expensive proposition. So,
yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so talking, if anyone has a question, just raise your hand at any point. We talked about APN, but again, I mean, in particular, Ralph and Chris in their opening speeches, they had actually you guys used the same slide, which was interesting. Other technologies from the IOWN Global Forum, like network digital twins or data center infrastructure, data-centric infrastructure, etc. Do you see any of those technologies, ancillary technologies, as I usually put it, that we build them in the IOWN Global Forum to support APN, but in any case, do you see any of these technologies being especially relevant for mobile?
Yeah, sure. You mentioned network digital twin, and yes, that is something that we are investing a lot in the Orange research for many reasons, but one of them is that, coming back to the sustainability point, we spend a lot of CO2 to send people to make repair on the network, to do maintenance activities, or sometimes even to go and configure manually some aspects. I mean, less and less by chance. But having the digital twin, having automation management capabilities will be very helpful in reducing all this burden, which has a cost and has also a negative environmental footprint. So from that perspective, this is one of the also important technological aspects which are developed in the IOWN Global Forum.
Okay, good. Anyone else?
I agree. I think digital twin for sure this will have an impact in fixed and mobile network. Not only because of cost reduction, as Eric said, but also for increasing quality. 80% or more of our network OTGs are handling the wrong configuration in the network. If you can implement in a digital twin the change you want to do in the network and check the changes are right, so you will avoid a lot of network impact. So yes, digital twin. We are working in IOWN in digital twin, but we are working in many other areas. Digital twin is key for telecommunication network, but both fixed and mobile, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And that will come quite soon, actually. I mean, step by step.
The timeline is shorter. Yeah. And maybe just to conclude, one last question. When discussing 6G, one of the main new things is sensing. And of course, fiber sensing is also a big thing. You see a combination where IOWN could play a role? I see Nakamura-san nodding.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And yes, our industry has a strong interest in the sensing, integrated sensing and communication now. And using the wireless radio, we can get the data by the wireless sensing. But we don't need to limit the sensing capability for the wireless. Of course, we can get the sensing data through the optical fiber. Yeah, I know. So any of the solution, wired, optical, and wireless, any of the sensing schemes should be used to get the data. Yes, and those kind of data can be, of course, very useful for the digital twin services in the future, and we can monetize so that we can monetize more to creating the new services. So we should use sensing by the optical fiber also together. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so I think it's time to wrap the panel up. I think it's been extremely interesting getting, the different perspectives. We discussed, the timeline, which is, more towards, the future rather than towards the present. And, the fact that it's not always about capacity and delay, but there's also, important aspects such as, energy consumption and the sustainability aspect and the CO2 emissions and the decarbonization that was discussed before. And then also in practical terms, how to basically get the networks deployed. I think it was extremely interesting. So with that, I would like to give, the panelists a round of applause. And I pass the floor back to our MC, Vito.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Excellent. As usual, lots of content. So we come to the end of the day, and we've had a lot of content and a lot of information. So I thought I'd spend the next 20 or 30 minutes recapping. No, not funny. All right. That's what we call a dad joke back at home. So dad jokes don't work well. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to just go through a couple of things. So thank you to all the panelists once again. Let's give them a great round of applause. Amazing stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide some of the PowerPoints that were done earlier in the day, based on permissions from the speakers. So you can find those on the website. I think in the next, we go to the next one. Anyway, you'll find the slides on the next one at iowngf.org. And we'll also have the videos there eventually. Can't tell you exactly when. So if you ever want to kind of get back into this, extremely great content. You can go to it anytime. And also I wanted to mention that the IOWN Global Forum booth, which is located in 2B40, is having a cocktail event tomorrow afternoon at 5:30. So you're all invited, and bring your friends if you like. And please join us at the IOWN Global Forum booth for cocktails at 5:30 tomorrow. Once again, I wanted to remind you about the two big upcoming events, one in Stockholm and one in Dallas. Please join us if you can. Both members and non-members are welcome to our Futures event, but also it's a 2 or 3 day event. Futures is half a day, so if you can't make the whole event and you're not a member, you can come for the half day. And also we will be at the OFC in San Francisco at the end of March. Lastly, I just want to wrap up. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time covering this, but hopefully today you learned a lot about what the IOWN Global Forum is about, what our goals are around sustainable, resilient, data-driven networks and computing. A lot of that message came through. It was hammered very well by everyone, both depth and breadth. And at the end of the day, the IOWN Global Forum really aims to bring the like-minded organizations, even though they're competitors, to drive the next generation of infrastructure, which is going to enable the future for all of us. So with that, I'm very happy to have you here. If any of you are interested in joining the IOWN Global Forum, please come and see any of us or join us tomorrow night at the networking event, and we'll be happy to sign you up. So with that, I am going to call it a wrap. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.